It's been around 2 weeks since I found out that my wife, Carolina, had cheated on me with her ex. She claims she did it because she felt insecure about my past with my ex Nadia. To be honest, it's the most ridiculous excuse I've ever heard, yet everyone seems to side with her and insists I should forgive her. I can't wrap my head around it, so I'm looking for opinions from people who aren't involved in this mess. I'll try to give a bit of background. It might get lengthy. Nadia and I go way back. We met when we were just 3 years old. Her mom was a nanny who took care of a bunch of kids, including me. We were so close that our mothers became friends and decided to enroll us in the same school. Basically, I spent my entire childhood with Nadia until I was 13. We were nicknamed the Siamese twins because of how inseparable we were. Sure, we argued a lot, but we always stuck together, which led to us being ostracized by other kids. Not that we minded, as long as we had each other. By the time we were 11, our family started thinking our closeness was unhealthy and that we needed to branch out and make other friends. It was during this time that we realized we were deeply in love, but our conservative families weren't too thrilled about it. She was of Arab descent, and I was African, so we had to keep our relationship a secret. When I was 13, I made the risky decision to sneak into her room on the first floor through her window. It was dangerous but thrilling. I'd done it a few times before. We'd just chat and occasionally kiss, nothing more. But one night, her father unexpectedly opened the door and caught us kissing. He was furious and tried to call the police. I scrambled to escape through the window, ended up falling, and broke my arm. The whole neighborhood witnessed the scandal unfold. Her father never liked me and even wanted to press charges. Even though I wasn't at much legal risk because of my age, it was humiliating for my family. My dad decided to send me to Africa for an indefinite period, mainly to separate us. I tried to adapt to my new life there, and she tried to move on with hers, but we managed to stay in touch through the internet. When I came back to France after high school, it felt like we had never been apart. We continued our relationship in secret, and by the time we were 20, we were certain we wanted to spend our lives together. We were naive to think it would be that easy. When we finally told our families about our intention to get married, it was like we had announced the end of the world. Our families were adamant that we marry within our own cultures, causing a lot of tension in the neighborhood. Even when we were kids, people always talked about us and judged our lives. It was painful, but we tried to hold on for a year. She wanted us to move to another city, far away from Paris and our families, to finish our studies. But my father fell ill, and I chose to stay. After he passed away, I didn't have the strength to keep fighting, so I decided to break up with her, and she moved to another city. We lost contact completely after that. I was tired of living in a neighborhood where everyone had an opinion about our lives, so I moved into the student residence at my university. That year was rough. I would go back to visit my family on weekends, and it was during one of these trips at a wedding that I met Carolina. She had just moved to the neighborhood with her family. We ended up sitting at the same table and spent the evening cracking jokes and sharing our stories. I told her about Nadia, and she told me about her ex. She had ended a 2-year relationship because she didn't want to have sex before marriage, and her ex wasn't willing to wait. She told him to marry her, but he wasn't ready, so she broke it off. We were both hurting, and we gradually became friends. However, I noticed she got increasingly irritated whenever I talked about Nadia, so I eventually stopped. Then one day, she confessed she had feelings for me. I was honest and told her I still had feelings for Nadia, but she suggested that dating her could help me move on. I agreed to give it a shot. At first, it felt strange being with another woman, but eventually I got used to it and even started to enjoy her company. Over time, though, Carolina grew increasingly jealous of Nadia. I stopped mentioning Nadia after Carolina's confession, but Carolina's behavior just got weirder. Living on campus meant I was out of the loop about the gossip circulating in the old neighborhood. People were still talking about my past with Nadia, sharing stories like the time I broke my arm trying to escape through her window. I tried to reassure Carolina, telling her that was all in the past, but she constantly compared herself to Nadia. It's true that Nadia was incredibly beautiful, but that wasn't something I had control over. Carolina resented me for dating someone so attractive, even though she'd never actually seen her. Maybe in a photo, I'm not sure. I always told Carolina she was the most beautiful woman to me because she was the one who mattered now, but she just couldn't stop the comparisons. If we did something together, she'd ask if I'd done it with Nadia. The thing that really bothered her was that I had been intimate with Nadia. It became unbearable. Despite all this, I asked her to marry me. She was from the same culture as me, which pleased my family. I just didn't have the energy to fight for anything different again. We planned the wedding for August. Perfect timing since I would be finishing my studies in July. Apart from her insecurity, everything seemed fine until 2 weeks ago. I got a call from an unknown number. It was Carolina's ex, claiming they were still seeing each other and had slept together several times. I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was trying to ruin our relationship. But then he sent me screenshots of their conversations. I dismissed them as easily fabricated, but he insisted on meeting up. I wanted to warn Carolina, but I decided to check it out first. I brought 2 friends along, just in case he was setting me up. When we met, he showed me his phone, Carolina's number, and all their conversations. Everything was there. They had been seeing each other for 2 months, and Carolina ended the affair a week before he contacted me. I called Carolina and told her we needed to talk. Strangely, I felt no anger or emotion, just a numb detachment, like I was watching my life unfold on a screen. A friend suggested I record our confrontation, so I did. When I confronted her with what I knew, she was shocked and denied everything, saying the guy was just trying to break us up. I showed her the screenshots, and she repeated what I had told the guy, that they could easily be faked. Then I told her I met him, and he had shown me their conversations, complete with details about our life that only she would know. At that point, she broke down, crying and begging for forgiveness. We were at her house, and her family came to see what was going on. I explained the situation, but they didn't believe me. I didn't try to convince them. I just left. Before I even got home, they had already contacted my family. When I arrived, I explained everything to my mom. Apparently, Carolina had spun a tale that she cheated because she thought I was secretly seeing Nadia, who, as it turns out, was back in town, a fact I wasn't even aware of. Now everyone is blaming me and Nadia, painting Carolina as the victim. I was so furious that I decided to cut off contact with everyone. It's been 10 days since I last spoke to anyone from the neighborhood. I've been staying with a friend from school, and no one knows where I am. I turned off my phone and only communicate with my mom through email. I've been getting tons of emails from Carolina, but I delete them without reading. That's pretty much the whole story. I'm not sure what to do next. Everyone's urging me to forgive her, but I can't see that happening. All I feel is disgust. I'm at a loss for what my next move should be. It's a complicated situation, and I have no idea how to navigate it. D-Day was right around the time of my finals, so I felt like I was on autopilot the entire time. Nothing else seemed to matter during that period, and honestly, focusing on myself was all I needed. Now, I've officially become an engineer. I kept no contact with Carolina, her family, my family, or anyone else meddling in my life. But when I got back to my apartment after my exams, everything hit me like a tidal wave. I felt exhausted and abandoned by everyone. The thought of turning on my phone and facing the messages was overwhelming, so I didn't. I just wanted to sleep. Most people describe having mental movies of their significant other with their affair partner, but oddly mine were of me with Carolina. I kept picturing all the times we cuddled and made out, and it made me feel dirty. I couldn't stop scratching myself. Then I'd go shower to try and wash away the feeling. I did that twice that evening. I couldn't sleep in my bed because it reminded me of all the times Carolina and I slept there together, so I ended up lying on the floor. The next day, whenever the images became too much, I'd start scratching again and take another shower to feel clean. I did that 8 times. Now it's down to 3 or 4 times a day, but I'm worried I might damage my skin. Has anyone else experienced this? I hope it's not turning into some kind of compulsive disorder. The next day, I finally turned on my phone. The messages poured in, over 200 texts and countless voicemails. I didn't read or listen to any of them. I just deleted everything. I didn't have the energy to go through the same crap of people telling me the same things over and over. I decided it was time to go back to my family's house. I couldn't keep hiding. It was a Saturday, so I knew people would be there. I've never been so stressed in my life. When I arrived, I found my uncle, my father's brother, and self-proclaimed head of the family since my dad passed, his wife whom I call the witch because, well, she is one, their kids, a few family friends, and my siblings 13M, 9M, and 5F. My mother was absent for some reason. As soon as I walked in, my uncle started yelling at me, but I ignored him. Seeing my little sister run up to me for a hug was a blessing. God, I love that little girl. My siblings look up to me. I felt guilty for not talking to them all this time. Usually, when I'm home on weekends, I help them with homework, tuck the younger ones in, and tell them stories my father used to tell me. Even when I'm at my own place, we talk every night to catch up on their day. We're very close. But my uncle kept yelling, and I couldn't take it. I felt like I was on trial, sitting there as if facing a jury, lol. The witch asked if I had regained my sanity. Apparently, Carolina had changed her story. She claimed she never slept with her affair partner. They only kissed. She said she felt so much pressure from me that she confessed to something she didn't do. But I know what I saw on her AP's phone. Carolina, or the girl who claimed to be her, had become a complete stranger to me. She turned out to be a manipulative person. How can someone hide such a vicious nature for so long? Or was I just too naive to see it? Before we started dating, she told me lying was a deal breaker, that she hated narcissistic perverts the most. Yet, she embodies everything she despises. It's beyond me. At that point, I didn't care anymore. I told everyone what I had been through and that they had a choice. Believe me, whom they've known my whole life, or believe someone they've known barely over a year. The witch insisted it was impossible because Carolina was a sweet and loving girl who volunteered in the community. I shot back that even Hitler volunteered at some point in his life. My uncle said if it was true Carolina slept with her AP, then I had the right to end the relationship as if I needed anyone's permission. But when the witch argued that it didn't matter even if it were true, because it was just a mistake made by a young girl, my uncle immediately agreed with her. He's the biggest fool I know. He might have his own opinion, but the moment his wife says something different, he changes his stance. I wouldn't be surprised if his wife cheated on him and he knew it. He's such a pushover. Maybe he's literally afraid of her. He's so much smaller compared to her. If you saw them walking together at night, you'd think it was a lady with her child. Then the witch told me to confess that all this was because of Nadia, 23F. I stayed calm and replied that I hadn't heard from Nadia in 2 years. My uncle then said if it wasn't because of Nadia, I should easily forgive Carolina. That was the last straw. I told him fine. I would forgive Carolina if he let me sleep with the witch for 2 months. Chaos erupted. My uncle wanted to hit me, but family friends held him back. I called them all hypocrites for asking me to forgive something they couldn't even fathom dealing with themselves. I told them to stay out of my life. The witch was crying, and my uncle swore he'd never forgive me and that I was dead to them. At the moment, I didn't care. I went up to my room feeling some regret because, despite everything, they were still my family. I admit there was a moment when I started doubting the reliability of what Carolina's AP showed me. For a brief time, I wondered if I could forgive her if it was just a kiss. But ultimately, I concluded that I couldn't. Never. When I was a kid and my parents couldn't pick me up from school because of work, our neighbor, who had 2 kids in the same school, would take care of me. He treated me like one of his own, always giving me little candies and gifts. I loved him dearly. He was a great man in everyone's eyes. Then one day, this kind and helpful man took his own life because his wife cheated on him. That's what infidelity can do. A year later, I heard his wife moved to Canada with their kids and her affair partner. Maybe my strong feelings against cheating come from that event. So I won't destroy myself just to make others happy by getting back with Carolina. Honestly, I don't understand why people are pushing so hard for me to reconcile with her or how it would benefit them. Anyway, my mom came back home after hearing what happened. She hugged me and asked about my feelings and my finals, showing her love in that quiet way she does. I remember when I used to work at a fast food joint while studying. I'd come home around 2 a.m., and she'd be there waiting for me, reheating dinner and sharing small talk. We had to stifle our laughs so as not to wake everyone up. So we talked about the situation with my uncle and his wife, and I finally gave her the full story about why I had to break up with Carolina. In my last post, I didn't mention that I only told my mom Carolina cheated, not the extent of it. So she, like everyone else, believed it was just a kiss. She was sorry for what I was going through, but what shocked me the most was seeing her cry. It was the first time I'd ever seen my mom cry. Even when my dad passed away, she was our rock, crying only at night when she thought everyone was asleep. Seeing her break down made me break down too. It was the first time I truly felt the weight of everything: sadness, anger, hatred, and hurt. She assured me she would support any decision I made. My mom went back downstairs, and everyone left. I didn't ask what she told them. I didn't care. I turned off my phone for another week because I was exhausted. I spent most of that time sleeping, catching up with my siblings, gaming with them, and trying to process the pain. My mom received several calls from Carolina's parents, but she only told me about them when she felt I was in a good place to hear it. Apparently, Carolina was having a tough time, even spending some time in the hospital, losing her mind because I went no contact. Carolina's parents begged my mom to let them meet with me just once, so even though my mom said I didn't have to, I agreed to meet them and Carolina next Saturday. Carolina has been controlling the narrative all this time, so now it's my turn. I'm not sure if we should meet at their place or mine, but I'll be ready. Someone suggested I call Carolina's AP and pretend I might give her a second chance if I don't have enough proof. I did that yesterday and we'll see him tomorrow, Sunday. He claims there's far more to the story than I know. He said he won't send me proof because he doesn't want me to show it to Carolina, which might ruin his chances with her, but hell, tell me everything. We'll see. As for Nadia, I plan to reach out to apologize for her name being dragged into this mess, even if it's not my fault. But before I could, she contacted me by email. It's not what you might think, though. She was super mad and didn't understand why people kept accusing her of messing up my relationship. But at least she was kind enough to ask if I was okay amidst all this chaos. I saw the message 2 days ago, but I haven't responded yet. Yesterday, I met with Carolina's AP. The situation is becoming increasingly heavy, and I'm too tired to go into all the details. But here's the gist of it. We met at the same place as before, and I recorded everything. Long story short, they had an on and off relationship for 4 years, and Carolina was never the virgin she claimed to be. He wasn't the first man she slept with. Despite Carolina cheating on him twice, he was crazy about her and willing to work through it each time. However, things took a turn when Carolina got pregnant and didn't know who the father was. Still, he was ready to accept the baby as his own and didn't want a paternity test. When Carolina's parents found out, they pressured her to have an abortion. Due to the stress, she eventually had a miscarriage. Carolina was deeply depressed, and her family decided to relocate for a fresh start. It was during this time that Carolina started developing the idea of being a born-again virgin, whatever that means. She broke up with him, and they decided to stay friends. So far, he hasn't shown me any concrete proof, claiming he changed his phone in the meantime. However, he did show me conversations they had throughout the period I knew Carolina. In the texts, Carolina mentioned meeting someone who could offer the kind of old-fashioned romantic relationship she always wanted. Over time, she said I was a good guy and that we could build something together. Throughout our relationship, AP became someone she confided in when she felt insecure. He knows practically everything about us, sharing details only Carolina and I would know. He believes that Carolina didn't like me at first, but was attracted to the idea of having an amazing relationship like the one I had in the past. He thinks she never truly loved me. She was obsessed with the idea of having me completely. While I'm not sure if the first part of his story is true, everything he's told me since I've known Carolina is corroborated by evidence. I'm getting angrier, and it's a feeling I'm not comfortable with. I don't want to meet Carolina's family, but I can't shake the feeling that they might have known who their daughter really was from the beginning. One thing is certain, I no longer want to meet Carolina. I have this overwhelming urge to send all the evidence to everyone I know, as it feels unfair that I, who grew up and lived in this neighborhood, must suffer the consequences of her actions. But at the same time, I don't want to stoop to that level. I still have a lot of respect for Carolina's parents. Maybe I should just send them the evidence and ask for an explanation before deciding whether or not to meet them. Did I meet Carolina and her family? Yes, I did. We met at my house with my mom present. Before the meeting, I sent a long audio message to Carolina's parents, explaining everything I had learned from her AP. I expressed my frustration with her playing the victim and portraying me as the villain. There was nothing left to save in the relationship, but if the rumors continued, I was prepared to expose Carolina in our social circle. I told them I would cancel the meeting unless she came clean. Immediately, Carolina's mother called me, saying Carolina had finally confessed everything. She had removed her posts and came clean on all her social networks. I don't use Snapchat or Instagram, so I had a mutual friend check, and it was true. I felt trapped by my own ultimatum because I didn't expect her to confess, given the importance of appearances in her traditional family. So I went ahead with the meeting. I thought it would be difficult to see Carolina, as thinking back to our moments made me feel agitated and uncomfortable. However, when we met, it wasn't as hard as I imagined. Carolina looked noticeably different. She had lost a lot of weight in a short time and seemed sad and lost. She couldn't look me in the eye and barely spoke. We made small talk at first until her mother began pleading with me to take her back, saying Carolina had acted out of insecurity. I had already prepared what I wanted to say and the questions I had, so I didn't deviate from that. I asked Carolina why she had lied about her past and pretended to be someone she wasn't. She started crying and wouldn't look at me. Her mother defended her, saying Carolina had always been judged for her past, and asked if I would have still dated her if I had known the truth. I responded that hypothetical answers weren't important. They only led to imaginary paths. The only reality that mattered was the one where she chose to lie about her past, bringing us to this point. In this reality, I've been in a relationship with someone who didn't exist, who lied to me, and I'll never know what's true in anything she ever said. In summary, Carolina's parents continued to defend her, but Carolina herself remained silent. The discussion seemed to go in circles. Eventually, they asked me, for the sake of the love I once had for their daughter, to postpone the wedding and take the summer to reconsider everything. I didn't expect this request and found it confusing. I wasn't sure how to respond. My mother, who had been quiet up to that point, noticed my struggle and spoke up. She reminded them that I had already made my decision, and if I changed my mind in the future, she would advise against it, but still support my choice. She clarified that the purpose of the meeting was to provide closure, not to consider reconciliation. She also noted that I was traumatized, sleep-deprived, and had been acting unusually, including my scratching, which she mentioned lightly. There was a pause in the conversation. Carolina then asked to speak with me privately. She insisted that it wasn't an attempt to persuade me to reconsider, but rather an opportunity to explain herself. I agreed to speak outside rather than in a room alone, so we went for a walk. During our walk, Carolina appeared vulnerable, and for the first time took full responsibility for her actions. She admitted to having a promiscuous past, with no trauma behind it. She grew up in a loving family, and it seemed to be just her nature. By the age of 18, she had already slept with over 40 people, and had stopped counting after that. Carolina explained that she had never truly known love before me. She had sought validation and affection through sex. Although AP loved her deeply, she couldn't reciprocate his feelings in the same way. She had hoped to find what she was looking for through intimacy, but after the act, she was left with only emptiness. When she became pregnant, she started to love her unborn child, but the miscarriage led her to question her entire life. Her family decided to move away to give her a fresh start, and she broke up with AP because she didn't love him, though they remained friends and continued to communicate. Before I even met Carolina, she had heard about me and Nadia. Our story was well known in the neighborhood, thanks to a fast food place we frequented. The owner's son, who was a friend, often took pictures of loyal customers and displayed them on the restaurant walls. Among the photos were two of me and Nadia, one from when we were 11 and another from when we were 19. The photo from my 19th birthday was particularly famous. Nadia had worked all summer to give me a dream birthday. She bought me a tuxedo, rented a limo, and promised a special evening. But when we got into the limo, it stopped just 200 meters from my house, and we ended up at the modest fast food place. I was embarrassed, having dressed up for what I thought was a grand celebration, only to find myself in a casual setting. Nadia, with her sense of humor, had a good laugh about it. We ordered our favorite kebabs, and she even bought a muffin with a candle, which the owner took a picture of. Despite the prank, it turned out to be a wonderful birthday. When Carolina learned about the story, she became intrigued. People told her more about me and Nadia, and she expressed a desire to experience that kind of love for herself. When she met me and realized I was the guy in the picture, she wanted to get to know me. However, she felt intimidated by the stories she had heard, and in her insecurity began lying to hide her past. Once she was emotionally invested in me, she couldn't backtrack on the lies without risking losing me. Carolina admitted that throughout our relationship, she felt guilty for the deception. She discovered a kind of love with me that she had never experienced before. Her fear that her feelings would vanish after intimacy led her to avoid being physically close to me. The lies she told made her feel unworthy, fueling her insecurities and leading her to sabotage our relationship by cheating with AP. The reality of being exposed and the realization of what she had become hit her hard. She tried to manipulate and guilt me into staying with her, but when that failed, she ended up in the hospital, overwhelmed by her actions and unable to cope. Carolina told me she didn't want to force me into reconciliation. Even if I forgave her, she would never forgive herself. She began therapy to understand her actions and herself better. She asked for my compassion and hoped that if I could find it in my heart to forgive her, she would be grateful for the rest of her life. At that moment, despite my empathy for her, I knew the feelings I once had were gone. I explained that I needed to distance myself to heal and that she needed to face her issues on her own to truly grow. Carolina accepted my decision, though she expressed that she would not give up on me and hoped we might reunite in the future. I wanted to tell her that I could never be with someone who had cheated on me, but I chose to remain silent on that point. I simply stated that I had moved on and that it wouldn't be fair to give her hope. We talked about other things until her parents called to say they were home. I walked her to her house and told her I would be going no contact. It was the healthiest choice for both of us, even though it would be challenging since we lived in the same neighborhood. She asked for one last hug, which I gave her, and then I left. I felt lighter after our conversation. My anger had subsided, though I know healing isn't always a straight path. And that was essentially the meeting. So, to answer the question, yes, I met Nadia. We had 2 meetings, and the first one was quite memorable. I already knew that Nadia was back in town, so it was only a matter of time before we ran into each other. That happened in a supermarket. I was with my siblings, and she was with her mom. For context, I've always been very close to Nadia's mother. She was like a second mom to me, having cared for me when I was younger. We kept in touch, calling each other once a month. Nadia also maintained a relationship with my mom, so unlike our fathers, our mothers never had issues with us being together. Nadia's dad was very traditional, believing that marrying within the same ethnicity was crucial for preserving their culture. My father, on the other hand, was proud of his heritage. Initially, he wasn't opposed to our relationship, but things changed when he learned that Nadia's father had publicly insulted me for holding her hand in the street. My dad saw this as undermining the struggles of the Black community, and he became opposed to our relationship. From that point, both families got involved, and it felt like our relationship was no longer ours to control. Despite this, our mothers continued to support us. When we broke up, I asked them not to keep me updated on each other's lives, as it was too painful. They respected that request, although I knew Nadia still spoke with my mom. Seeing Nadia in the supermarket was surreal. She was even more beautiful than I remembered. After 2 years apart, there we were. I was so nervous that I could barely speak. Nadia's mom, ever the mediator, made light of the situation and left us alone, saying we needed to talk. She continued her shopping with my brothers, giving us some privacy. I can't recall the details of our conversation because I was on the verge of fainting from nerves. In the end, we didn't discuss anything profound, but we exchanged numbers to catch up later. The next day, I called Nadia, and we decided to meet at a restaurant in 3 days. Before that meeting, we talked on the phone for hours every day. She shared what she had been up to over the past 2 years. She had just graduated and would soon start a remote job that allowed her flexibility. She also mentioned her passion for drawing and storytelling, and her dream of writing her own manga. With the security of her diploma and job, she finally felt ready to pursue this dream. Her ambition and growth over the years were impressive. In contrast, I felt like a disappointment. Every time I went out, I wondered if people were talking about me and my failed relationship with Carolina, if they were mocking me for being so blind to her true self. The contrast between our paths was stark and painful. The second meeting. When we met for the second time, it became clear that my feelings for Nadia had never truly faded. I realized that I love her deeply and always will. Even though I've grown, my values have evolved, and I'm no longer the person I once was. My love for her has remained constant. I missed her profoundly, our conversations, my best friend, and the love of my life. It took seeing her twice and having several phone conversations to understand just how much I missed her. It's a painful realization, and I feel almost pathetic for it. I thought I had a clear understanding of myself, my needs, and the life I was building with Carolina. But I wonder how things might have played out if Carolina had never hurt me and I had met Nadia under different circumstances. Would I have broken Carolina's heart or been unfaithful? I'm grappling with the possibility that my principles might not be as solid as I once believed. I recall a comment from an older man who said that we're all deceivers to some extent. Some people recognize it, while others don't. According to him, we're all ticking time bombs, poised to betray our values when the right conditions arise. I dismissed his perspective as a rationalization of his own behavior, but maybe there's some truth to it. Could Nadia, who I believed would never cheat, also fall victim to those conditions? It's disheartening to question her integrity, even though I still believe she's a person of high principles. When I asked her about her dating life over the past 2 years, she told me she hadn't been with anyone. Given her beauty, intelligence, confidence, and generosity, I found it hard to believe. I told her I didn't think it was true, assuming she was sparing my feelings. She was initially confused by my reaction, but then smiled. She understood my doubts given my recent experiences, but advised me to address these issues before they became significant problems. She suggested that I take a break from the neighborhood and go on vacation to clear my mind. I told her I didn't want to travel alone. My siblings were planning a trip to Senegal, and I couldn't envision going there with them. Senegal's vibrant and hospitable atmosphere wasn't what I needed at the moment. Nadia then proposed that we go on vacation together, given that we had a lot to talk about. Without hesitation, I agreed. It was surreal. After 2 years apart, we were now planning a trip together. When I told my mom about the vacation, she was more concerned about me than anything else. She warned me not to break Nadia's heart and to behave honorably, joking about no sex before marriage. We decided to go to one of the Center Parc's holiday villages in France, renting a cozy cottage with 2 bedrooms. It was a stunning location, surrounded by nature, old castles and farms, with plenty of activities to enjoy. On the first evening, I wanted to address what happened 2 years ago, my pain, her pain, and how we had both been affected. However, Nadia suggested that the trip wasn't the right time for such discussions. She wanted to be a support system for me, instead of diving into the past right away. She promised we'd talk about it at the end of our stay. So I didn't push and focused on enjoying our vacation. It turned out to be one of the best trips I've ever had. We laughed like children, played games, cycled for miles each day, and simply enjoyed each other's company. When either of us needed space, we took it, sometimes hanging out alone or just being together in silence. It felt like we had never been apart. On the last day of our vacation, as we prepared to head home, Nadia asked if I was ready to discuss our breakup. I told her I was, though I wasn't as prepared as I thought. She began by expressing how she felt when we ended things. She was visibly upset and angry, crying and shaking as she spoke. She questioned how I could abandon her after we had built such a strong relationship over the years. She reminded me of the sacrifices she had made for us, turning her back on her family, believing in our future, and being ready to build the life we had always dreamed of. She couldn't understand how I could let her down so completely. Nadia revealed that she had promised herself she would never be in another relationship after our breakup. The pain was so overwhelming that she didn't want to risk experiencing it again. She found solace in her studies in the library, but then learned I was with Carolina a year after our split. This discovery shattered her, as she felt that a year wasn't enough time to move on from someone she had known since childhood and with whom she had shared so much. It made her question her understanding of who I was. She admitted that, despite many guys being interested in her, she never considered flirting with anyone or seeking validation from others. She felt something was wrong with her and decided she needed to change. To her shock, she felt guilty and nauseated when a guy she was seeing held her hand. She realized she needed help and began seeing a therapist. She started focusing on things she could control, like her academic success, career, and life choices. Yet she admitted to harboring deep resentment towards me, especially upon learning of my engagement to Carolina. The discussion was intense and emotional, revealing how much she had struggled with her feelings and the impact of our breakup on her life. It was clear that while she had made strides in her personal growth, the pain and resentment were still very real. After finishing her finals, Nadia returned to see her family, whom she hadn't seen in 2 years. Her decision to reconnect with them stemmed from realizing that the conflicts she had with her father weren't worth the struggle she faced over me. Initially, when she learned about Carolina's infidelity, her first reaction was a sense of karma, but she quickly became concerned for me, knowing how deeply I was affected by betrayal. When we met, Nadia was still angry, but as we talked, she came to understand that her anger wasn't truly directed at me. It drove her crazy to feel so vulnerable and emotionally exposed in front of someone she had always seen as strong and capable. Despite her independent and logical nature, she realized that her love for me never truly faded, and it was a love that didn't make sense to her, but was undeniably there. However, even though she loved me deeply, she didn't want to be with someone who might leave her at the first sign of difficulty. She couldn't bear the thought of facing the same fears of abandonment again. During our conversation, she broke down and cried in my arms, expressing frustration with her own irrational actions. I listened without interrupting, choosing to honor her feelings rather than offer explanations or justifications that might seem dismissive. When it was my turn to speak, I shared my regrets and reflections. I told her that, had my father still been alive, I would have never left to be with her, as my responsibilities to my family would have taken precedence. I admitted that I should have handled our breakup differently. I should have suggested a long-distance relationship, as we had been able to manage in the past. I acknowledged that I might not deserve a second chance with her, given how I had failed to be the strong, confident person I once thought I was. I apologized for the hurt I had caused, and for not making the right decisions. Nadia also apologized for putting me in the difficult position of choosing between her and my family. She recognized that she had been selfish in focusing solely on her own pain without considering my responsibilities. The discussion, which lasted over 3 hours, was intense and emotional, but it felt necessary for both of us. In a surprising turn, Nadia noted that my reluctance to rush into a relationship, my lack of justification for my actions, and my evident struggle with feelings of being lost made her see a significant growth in my maturity. She recalled how I used to always feel the need to be perfect, to make all the right decisions, and to set an example. She observed that my current state reflected a more mature and nuanced understanding of myself and my circumstances. This deep conversation marked a significant moment of clarity and mutual understanding for us. It was clear that while we had both grown and changed, the unresolved feelings and the impact of our past experiences still loomed large. If there's one thing I'm sure of right now, it's that I'll love Nadia for the rest of my life. That's the only certainty I have left. Just 3 months ago, everything seemed so clear. I was set to finish my final exams, become an information systems engineer, get married, and start a promising job in October with a company that had offered me an excellent contract after my internship. My future was neatly mapped out, but then life happened, and everything changed. The path I had meticulously planned was suddenly shrouded in uncertainty. I had always dreamed of pursuing a PhD and a career in research, a goal I had to put on hold when I decided to marry Carolina. I thought it was more responsible to dive straight into work, given that Carolina still had a year of study left, and I needed to support us both. Now, with my life upended, I'm questioning if it's too late to reignite that dream of a PhD. Should I still chase after it, or is it a closed door? If Nadia and I were to start over, she's made it clear that living in the neighborhood again isn't an option. Our last year together nearly broke her, and she's vowed never to face such trauma again. The problem is, I can't leave Paris. I can't abandon my siblings, who are still so young and need me, nor can I leave my mother to struggle on her own. I promised my father I would look after them until the youngest is in middle school. Nadia's words about needing my siblings more than they need me, and my tendency to replace my father, sting deeply. It's a harsh truth, but she's always been the type to speak uncomfortable realities. And then there's the question of Nadia and me. We've both acknowledged our love, but I'm far from the best version of myself right now. We've decided to start as friends, but the tension between us during our vacation was palpable. I found myself having to meditate each morning just to keep from making a move on her. I fear that I might hurt her by rushing into something too soon. Yet I also don't want to push her away and miss this rare chance to rebuild what we once had. So here I am, lost in a labyrinth of choices, with no clear direction forward. The only certainty is my love for Nadia, but everything else feels like a tangled mess, waiting for me to find a way through. Nadia suggested I start individual therapy to work through my own issues, and I agreed. I've already scheduled online sessions for September to ease into the process and find a rhythm with the therapist. She also proposed that we both engage in therapy together to rebuild our trust and heal, even if we decide to remain friends. I'm on board with that too. It seems essential for both our healing processes. In the meantime, we've planned a motorhome trip around France for September. Nadia can continue working remotely while we travel, and I'll use the time to reflect on my own life and search for a thesis director. This journey also offers me a chance to step back and see how my siblings manage without me constantly hovering. It's a financially viable adventure and a much-needed change of scenery. So here I am, poised at the edge of a new chapter, with many decisions ahead. The road is uncertain, but at least it's one I'm stepping onto with a clearer sense of purpose and a heart ready to heal.